Yo, what's up, my people? What's up, world? What up, y'all? What's up? How's everybody feeling? Yes. I am back in the building as I was a couple of hours ago. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody is feeling good. I hope everybody had a safe day. Hope everybody's feeling blessed. Hope everybody's in good spirits. We're gonna get this going right now. Y'all know what today is. Y'all know it's always Throwback Thursdays. You know, I always have these epic conversations about throwback fighters, but today is about to be a little different. Today, we're talking about fighter Tommy Morrison. For you guys who probably don't remember um, about him, he was one of my favorites. A lot of y'all might just know him for the Rocky movie, but I know him for putting in pain. He put in a lot of pain, and the great thing about it, we're gonna have his wife up here as a special guest. So let's not waste any more time, and she's already been back here waiting. So let's get it going. So all right. So for my newcomers, my regulars, everyone, welcome to the No Doug Zone podcast. Let's go. But without further ado, let's bring up Miss Morrison.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
How you doing, Miss Morrison? How's it? Yes, I
I'm
yes
I'm
I
doing
can. I can hear you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you,
Oh,
Clarence?
okay. Now I hear you. You sound like you're going in and out.
Okay, can you hear
First of
me?
all, I want to tell you this is an honor and pleasure because I can hear you. I can hear you. It was going in and out, but I can hear you. This is an honor and a pleasure, and thank you so much because today, you know, I was just going to do a regular conversation and with a couple of my other guys on here. So to see that you're on here is beautiful and it's a blessing. And thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, Clarence,
Thank you
thank
so
you for
much.
taking the
So,
time.
oh yes, because Tommy was actually one of my favorite fighters. A lot of people don't know that, but I've always stressed that for the last couple of years. I've told people that, and they never knew why he was one of my favorite fighters. And I had to explain to them. I said, you know, Tommy was a bad boy. He was a bad boy in that ring, and fighting is what he loved to do. And every time you saw him fight, you didn't get disappointed. I don't care if he won or lost. There was no disappointment because he always came in there with all the heart. So that's what I loved about him. But let's get this started. First of all, how are you feeling? How's your day?
I'm doing
How have you been feeling?
Yeah, it's a great day. It's been a hot day
Okay, beautiful.
and yep. Can you hear me
So
okay?
let's take it back. I can hear you. It's going in and out, but I can hear you. I can hear you. So let's take it back. Where did you and Tommy meet?
Okay, we met actually unofficially in 1996 in Las Vegas, Nevada. And then actually in person in 2009 in Wichita, Kansas. That's how we met.
Okay. Um, was it like before that, were you ever into boxing or did you get into it as soon as you met him? Like were you into it already?
No, no, I was not into boxing. My world was tennis and tourism, dealing with tourists coming over to the
Oh,
USA. So boxing was not on the top of my list. Clarence, I didn't even know what sparring meant, right?
yeah. Yeah. I mean when you met him, right, and you got with him and you knew he was in the fighting game or he told you, what did you think about that? Because you know a lot of females sometimes they get intimidated talking to a guy that's in combat sports, because they always look at guys that's in combat sports that they got hot tempers, and if they ever get mad at me, they might take it out on me. I mean, how was he when you met him? Was he, was he nice? Like, what was he like? Was he approachable?
Yeah, yeah, very much. When I met him, Clarence, I met somebody that was not what the media portrayed him as. He was very humble. He was homeless. He was not famous, and he had no future in front of him. He had not even $20 in his pocket, but he was still such a nice guy. It was very humbling for him to be in that situation. And I think what he enjoyed about us is that I wasn't after fame and fortune from him, because that isn't something that I do. And so I got to know the real Tommy Morrison. So he was very funny. He came up with stories, but he also came up with eventually stuff about his past, about how he was a boxer and how he was in a movie called Rocky Five, which Clarence I had never seen, right? And I didn't get to see it until 3, 4 years after Tommy died. So it was a lovely relationship. Such a nice guy. A lot of people have no idea really who the real Tommy Morrison was.
Hmm. You know what? You said something that kind of startled me, because at that time I didn't know he was in that predicament, or as being homeless and not having any money. I really didn't know that. So this is actually the first time that I'm hearing this, because with these fighters, you hear so many stories from people who either act like they like these fighters or they used to be around them, and then here it is, you hear the story for somebody who's actually married to him, and they can give you the real, that's it's sad, because I never knew that he was even in that predicament. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
And for you to still talk to him, you could have easily been that person that been like, well, this is what you used to be. Why would I talk to you now? Like, because you got some people who can only talk to people for what they can get out of them. But you didn't do that. You just went right ahead and said, hey, let me get to know you, get to know your past, and then we can go from there.
yeah. I think that's really important, because when a lot of the boxers leave their occupation, whether they're forced to retire or they just cannot fight anymore, a lot of people don't realize what happens to them. They literally just go off the radar. And one thing Tommy would always say to me was that when the money is gone, so are your fake friends. And he would say that often. He would try and contact some of the people that he knew to see if they might help him. And he would put his head down and shake his head. They would never return his phone call. So yeah, it is a sad situation. One thing that I always stress is you don't give up on anybody. Never give up on anybody.
For you at the time when you were talking to him, for the people who knew who he was and what he used to be, did anybody ever look at you like, why are you wasting your time with this guy? He's finished. You're not gonna get out of nothing. You're not gonna get nothing out of talking to him. Like, why are you dealing? Did you ever get those questions from people he know or your family? Did anybody ever approach you like that?
Quite a few people approached me like that. But then when they realized that Tommy Morrison was a human being, and I fought them off,
Hmm.
they stopped saying stuff like that, because it only got into Tommy's head that, oh, he's finished, he's got no future for him.
Yeah.
But there were other things that
Hmm.
he could focus on. And that's what we focused on. And in fact, our life was private. It wasn't out in the media. You didn't know who I was until maybe today. And so we kept everything very private and we led a normal life. He emptied out the garbage, right? He did cooking. He would do errands. He actually enjoyed the normal life.
How hard was it for him to face reality that whatever he was going through, that he can never go back to being what he was? Because I'm sure it was at some point that he couldn't get back in that ring and fight for whatever reason it was. Was that challenging for him? I mean, how did he sleep at night? Did he eat well? Like, how was his attitude, when you were around him? Because I'm sure when nobody else was around him, he was waking up to you, he was going to sleep to you, he was probably telling you everything that he probably never told anybody else. So how did he deal with that?
Yeah, those are great questions, Clarence, because that did happen every day. Every day he would sit down and he would say, "What happened on February 10th, 1996, when I got kicked out of boxing? What happened to me? Who was responsible for that?" And he would not be very motivated to go to the gym. He wouldn't be motivated to just get up and go training. But then the switch turned in his head that he knew that there was something more to live for. And so he started to give back, right? We opened up a gym and he went in that gym and the kids thought he was the greatest person, and he gave back his time. He didn't charge any of the children for training them. In fact, he kept saying to them, we were actually in the poorest neighborhood in Wichita, Kansas. We opened up a TCB gym and it had everything in there that you could think of. Title boxing were the ones that provided everything. The kids from the neighborhood were the ones that came and trained. And every day he had a purpose. He finally had a purpose. But he knew every day that there was no way he could get back in the ring. Nobody wanted to fight him. Clarence, nobody wanted even to be within 6 feet of him. There was so much isolation in his life after that 1996 so-called diagnosis, which we found out since then that he was never diagnosed with this deadly virus. But how did he sleep? When he slept, he was boxing in his sleep, Clarence. He would box still in his sleep. His legs would be moving, and you would suddenly see a left hook come out from under the sheets. So it was his life. Boxing was his life.
Yeah, I can't imagine because I'm not in that space or that place that, hey, I found something to do and now I can no longer do it. All I can do is go to sleep and dream about it.
Yeah,
And to make matters worse, the people I thought that loved me, that I constantly look out for, and might have gave them a couple of dollars when they needed it, won't even answer the phone for me. I mean,
yeah,
I can only think the best thing that probably happened to him was you coming into his life, and not just you coming into his life, but you're understanding him because you're an understanding person. So I always say God makes no mistakes. So for him to marry you and be with you was not by accident, because God forbid, had you not came into his life, we probably would be talking about suicide.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what we're probably would be speaking about. We will be actually talking about suicide, because when you feel like no one's there for you and no one's going to listen to you, but then you have this one particular person, amazing person, that's listening to me. And even though she's by my side, I still feel like something's missing because I can never go back to boxing again. But thank God I have her by my side. That's a blessing.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
a it's definitely.
When you're in a situation like this, there's just a handful of people that do stay around you, and I witnessed that. I when I started to look at his boxing record and watch his boxing videos, I saw all these crowds of people out there all shouting at his name, right? You were probably too. And then when I looked at him without the crowds had gone. That was it, just a handful of people. I could name them now for you, but I think that, we'll keep that to a little bit later on in Tommy's story, maybe not on this program. But he actually says what you just mentioned.
Yes.
One of the therapeutic things that he did was he wrote his own memoirs. He wrote a couple of books, paperback books. And let me just read you one of the pages, okay, Clarence, because it'll make sense because of
Okay.
what you just said. He goes, this was about his day in 1996. He goes, I just spent 8 years of my life, blood, sweat, and tears, building myself up to be this heavyweight sensation that everyone's mouth was watering for, to watching everything I'd worked so hard for being taken from me. It disappeared like a vapor, like a puff of smoke. My livelihood, my dream, and my reputation was stripped from me in the blink of an eye, and I became socially inverted. I was the only one that understood me. Everyone else was stabbing in the dark, trying to convince each other what was going through my mind and where my head was, and not if, but how I was going to self destruct. And then he goes on to say, every physical fiber and every spiritual fiber in my body was screaming out at me that I was fine.
Wow. He took a lot of time writing that.
Yeah,
He took some time writing that, and he meant. You could tell by his deliverance, he meant everything that he wrote. The funny story about Tommy, right, was I remember watching Rocky Five, right, and at this time I'm a kid, so I'm thinking all this is real, and in which that's probably one of my favorite Rockies. It's one of my favorite Rocky
yeah,
movies to watch, and the funny part wasn't, and he did an amazing job too in that. He did. I mean, the job he did in that was amazing, and I don't think that one could have been complete if he wasn't in it. Because you went from seeing him as this nice kid, and then you got this guy that I feel like is like playing the Don King role, and then he gets Tommy to be this mean guy and turns on Rocky, and then Rocky got to beat him up at the end. But that's not the thing that startled me. The thing that startled me is, so now I'm watching the fight. I think, was it him and George Foreman? It was some fight I was watching with him in it, and I remember telling my father, "That's the guy that was in the Rocky movie." I was like, "Oh, he's a real fighter." And my father was
yeah,
like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, son, he's a real." But for me, I didn't know that. So when I saw him, I'm like, "Oh!" I said, "Rocky wasn't supposed to beat him up. That guy's a real fighter." But I'm a kid at this time, so that's how my imagination is. But I fell
yeah,
in love with him after that. But then seeing the fights that he was in, and he was in a lot of big fights, and I always wanted to see him in more fights. And it got to a point where it was like, okay, we see him, and then after that is, where's Tommy? And before we found out what happened or what they said happened, I was trying to figure out, like, okay, what happened with him? Because you don't know. At this time, I'm like, what happened to Tommy? Man, I wanted to see him against Mike Tyson. I wanted to see him in there with Holyfield. I wanted to see him in there
yeah,
with Riddick Bowe. I felt like it was so much left on the table that we didn't get to see. And then we hear this, oh, he caught this, he caught AIDS, he caught this. And I'm like, wait a minute, no, hold on. Are you serious? Did this really happen? And the media is so dangerous, it's so disrespectful with putting stuff out. You know, before they could even find out the truth, they take something and run with it. And it's like, do you even know if this is the truth or not? Have you talked to his wife?
Yeah.
Have you? Or you just is somebody paying you to say this? Because we all know the media is very disrespectful and they don't care. All they care is about ratings. That's all they care about. So the most important thing to me was I always wanted to know what happened to Tommy. What's the real story? And the only way to get that story, you know, and not saying this is the reason why I have you up here as a guest, because this is an honor and pleasure, but we all just want to know, the real boxing fans, what happened to our brother Tommy Morrison.
Yeah. Yeah, and you are right, very right about the mainstream media. And they do continue to this day to still put out stuff that's not correct. And basically, their excuse, Clarence, is, well, it's already in the public domain. Yeah, but, was that the truth? Is that really what happened? For example, you've got ESPN Merrill. She's a writer for ESPN. She was the one that came out and said Tommy Morrison's latest big fight since February 10th, 1996, when the Nevada Commission said Morrison tested positive for HIV before a fight. The 44-year-old has spent most of his days dodging the diagnosis. So one of the things I did was I went to court after Tommy passed away, after finding out that he never had this deadly virus. And my court case was, okay, ESPN, the mainstream media, is saying that he was diagnosed with HIV in Nevada on February 10th, 1996. And it's still up there. And her name is Elizabeth Merrill. So after 12 years of court case, Clarence, I went to the federal court in Nevada. I went to the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco. Then I went to the US Supreme Court, got some new evidence, came back again to federal court in Nevada, went back to the Ninth Circuit, went back to the US Supreme Court. After 12 years, I actually found out what happened on February 10th, 1996. That was my deathbed promise to Tommy, is what happened, because he had tried for years to find out. And what happened is nobody ever diagnosed my husband with HIV in Vegas. And a document here, and in fact, for this interview, all I need to bring to you is some excerpts from the lawsuit, right, which I'll read to you. The state defendants, which is the Nevada State Athletic Commission in Nevada. It's Mark Ratner, who is in charge of the UFC now, but he was the executive commissioner on February 10th, 1996. And Dr. Margaret Goodman, who does all the drug testing, right, for VADA. And they say under oath, okay, they say under oath, neither the state defendants nor the Quest Diagnostics, which is the lab, ever diagnosed Mr. Morrison as carrying the HIV virus. That's under oath in court documents, docket 174, page 7, lines 2 to 4. So that cancels out what ESPN have out there. Not only that, there's also another document, which is docket 217, and this is by the commission, the Nevada Commission themselves. They go, this honorable court should not lose sight of the fact that no one diagnosed Mr. Morrison with HIV on February 10th, 1996. So why did he get kicked out? Okay, the Nevada Commission didn't diagnose him, then the doctor must have diagnosed him. Well, court records again, the counsel for the doctor that did Tommy's examination and everything says it is important for you to understand that Dr. Voy did not diagnose and never has diagnosed Mr. Morrison as HIV positive. And his name is Counsel Mortensen. And it's docket 283, page 28, lines 14 to 15. And if that's not enough, Clarence, the actual CEO of the lab in 1996 writes in his affidavit, which, as you know, is stamped under oath, penalty of perjury. And he goes, I conclude that Mr. Morrison was never infected with the HIV virus. And that's in court documents, docket 136, page 9, lines 27 to 28. So nobody diagnosed Tommy with HIV. Not only that, I have Tommy's death certificate, and on there it's got cardiac arrest, multi-organ failure, septic shock, and septicemia. And I have an exhibit from Boston, Massachusetts General Hospital, which is called an antemortem, which is an examination that was done prior to Tommy's death, a year prior to Tommy dying, and it's signed and electronically filed, where there's no viral inclusions, fungi, or bacterial forms. And then to finish that off, Tommy's postmortem, and they did an extensive pathology examination, and they also found no HIV virus. So no HIV virus was found in Tommy, no HIV virus was diagnosed in Tommy, and then to finish it all off, I even had physicians do testing on Tommy to decide whether he had AIDS or not. All right. And they did the testing. And these are physicians that Tommy never met, but they're the ones that did the testing. And the AIDS diseases that you would have if you had the virus, all the tests came back negative. Negative. So no AIDS, no HIV. And that's not as per Tricia Morrison or Tommy Morrison. It's as per physicians, scientists, experts in the field of virology and microbiology. So all those years, Clarence, where he was not allowed in the ring and people distanced themselves from him, was all a waste.
Now, it sounds to me, and I'm sure to the rest of the world, that number one, there was some foul play in this, right? Because just how you're explaining it, it's crazy. Because it seemed like it just happened out of nowhere. Like if he was set up, like they were purposely trying to get him out the game for whatever reason. But what I want to ask you, because at this time, this had to be hard for you. Did you question yourself, like, oh my God, before you found out, oh my God, do I have to go get tested out? I might have something. Like, did you ever think like that, or did that never cross your mind?
I asked all the questions that everybody else always asked me. You know, did you see the test results in
Yeah.
1996? And he said no. Well, who told you you had HIV in 1996? Well,
Hmm.
it was Tony Holden. And I said, well, who is Tony Holden? And he said, well, he used to promote fights, but he was under contract with Don King for February 10th, 1996. So
Mm.
is Tony Holden a physician? No. So why is somebody that's not a physician telling you that you have HIV without even a test result? Tommy, what test was given to you? Oh, I don't know. It was a $23 test. I said, okay, so you never saw the results and a real physician never told you. He said, no. And I said, okay, so when they flew you to Tulsa suddenly and you were put in front of the podium and told that you definitely had the virus, well, where's the test results for that test? He said, I never saw it. I never saw the test results. And during the actual lawsuit, Clarence, they weren't even produced either for that huge conference, press conference that was had in Tulsa to try and solidify the diagnosis from HIV, which we now know was never made. Now, apart from that, remember that Don King was Tommy's promoter. for the very first time, Don King was Tommy's promoter. He
Yes.
had just signed he had just signed a multi-million dollar contract with Don King, and it was to fight Mike Tyson in the end. So it was over
Hmm.
$35 million. And during the actual lawsuit, the commission came up with another document that they filed in court, not me, but they filed it, and it was actually lifting Tommy's suspension 10 years later on July 11th, 2006. So he was kicked out of boxing from 1996. His suspension was lifted in 2006, but Tommy never ever got to see this document. He'd already passed away by then. But why did Don King not call Tommy up and go, hey, we just lost 10 years of your prime. Let's get you back in the ring. Let's get you fighting Don King. That didn't happen. Let's get you fighting Mike Tyson. But Don King never called him. And that was one thing that Tommy would talk about a lot, that he tried to get through to Don King. Don King never returned his phone calls. And he also tried to get through to Carl King, who was or is Don King's son, to see if he could arrange a fight for him. And nobody returned his phone calls.
Like, and this goes back to what I said, that it was like the fix was in, like he was being set up, because none of this makes sense, but at the same time it makes sense that it's like they were purposely trying to get him out. And I didn't know the part about Don King. I mean, 10 years, you should have picked up the phone when that man's calling you to answer. I mean, that's crazy, because he has now, Tommy, I'm sure sometimes he's not dumb. I don't care how long he's been out the game. He's not dumb. I have questions
Yeah.
and I need answers, but I can't get the answers I'm looking for because I can't get nobody to answer the phone for me.
Yeah.
So now I'm frustrating. I'm frustrated now because where do I turn to? I'm being, I'm being diagnosed with something that I don't know how it, like, this is crazy. Like, I don't, I'm sure he went to bed a lot of nights with confusion, and if I'm him, I can't sleep. I can't sleep because how can I live? How could you tell me to move on and live a normal life and just go ahead and things happen? You took my career from me, but really before it really even begun. I had a chance to fight one of the most baddest men on the planet. And who knows if that fight right there could have changed my life, win or lose. But y'all just purposely took all that from me and then diagnosed me with something that I didn't like. I didn't ask for that. I mean, we always wanted to know the real side of, what happened to him and like, how did he really die? So all right. So with all that, I mean, all right. So let's go back. How long did it take for you to get all this information?
It took me from 2013, literally the moment Tommy died, through to 2023. And I'm still gathering more and more information. But it took 20 years from the day that Tommy was medically indefinitely worldwide suspended. It took 20 years for Nevada to come through and say that they never diagnosed Tommy with HIV. 20 years. They could have said that 20 years ago, right? While Tommy was still alive. So what happened was when you're
Yes.
told that you cannot fight anymore, which is something that he had done all his life. When you're told that, when it's ripped from you and is torn out of your heart, because that's what he had, his heart was for boxing, is you turn to drugs. Clarence, you turn to how he would say it, I had to fill a void. Okay. And the void for him was turning to drugs. And he openly writes about it in his book. There are some pages where he talks about drugs, where he said he couldn't wait to take the drugs so that he could sleep. So you're right, he couldn't sleep. So in order for him to sleep, he would be up days doing drugs just so that he could go to sleep. That's how he filled the void.
At the time.
And then I met him, and I had said to him, I said, if you want to carry on doing what you're doing drugs, getting arrested, and just not living a life, then carry on doing that. I said, but there's just so much more out there for you that if you want to give up drugs, I'll help you. And he was on the fence at that time. And then one day I just thought, you know what? He has so much more ahead of him. He doesn't realize it. And I met him at the airport when he flew back from an event in Los Angeles. And I had a little yellow Volkswagen Beetle, right? And he was sitting in the front. And I had bought a drug test from Walgreens. It was like a $20 drug test. And I didn't start the car. He was sitting in the passenger seat, Clarence, and I said to him, whip it out and pee in this cup right now. And he looked at me, right? I said, I am going to test you. And I was a little bit scared because here I am talking to a big heavyweight boxing champion of the world, whether he was still boxing or not, he was still a champion. And
Yeah.
he listened to me. He peed. He peed in the cup, right? And it started from there. And I tested it. I'd never tested anybody ever in my life before, never had to. I don't do drugs. I've never done drugs. And so when I tested it, I looked and just about everything flagged on that test. And I gave him the ultimatum. I said, carry on doing what you're doing, or start rehab. And so it took him a day to think about it, but he started rehab. And it wasn't easy, you know, because in the media he was portrayed as a drug addict, right? Hookers, drinking. You know, there's a reason for all that. There's a reason why he was doing that, except for he wasn't doing hookers, right? We'll come to that in a moment. But there's a
Yes.
reason he had to fill a void. And unfortunately, if you live in a state like Kansas, you can't do marijuana. It's illegal, you know. And he kept on saying, well, you know, it should be legal. Well, maybe it will be one day. I said, but right now, if you're caught with marijuana, that's it. You go to jail. So he did drug rehab, and for the first time ever, he successfully completed it. So, Clarence, when I see something out there where the haters, the Tommy Morrison haters are, who've never met him, post, oh, he was a drug addict, he had demons. If he didn't have demons, he would have got on a lot better in boxing. Whoa, wait, you've got the timeline all wrong. All this major stuff happened when he got kicked out of boxing. So something that I say to a lot of people is there is hope out there. You don't have to turn to drugs. You turn to the gym, you turn to working out, you turn to loving yourself again. But you don't have to be known as a drug addict for the rest of your life. And I will fight that for the rest of my life, that he attended drug rehab. It was successful, and he was the happiest he had ever been, even though he only had $20 in his pocket, right? He was drug free. And he was just so proud of that. And he kept copies of his drug free results. And he put one in the bedroom, one on the fridge, one in the car. And he would show everybody. He even posted one on Facebook, right? When he figured out how to do that. But that's the Tommy Morrison that people need to remember, right? The person that actually was successful. One of his biggest fights was his drug rehab.
That had to be a lot to deal with. You probably not the only, but probably one of the strongest women on earth, because there's only so much a person's going to take and deal with. even if a person is down, sometimes you just can't deal with it. Listen, man, this is what you want to do. You want to feel sorry for yourself. I'm gone. I can't deal with it. Because my family really don't want me to deal with you. My friends don't want me to deal with you. The public doesn't respect you no more. Boxing threw you away.
Yeah.
They diagnosed you with something that you really didn't have. So what am I standing around for? I need to get the hell out of here before they make a meme out of me too. But you didn't do that. You was his backbone. And the thing that's amazing is that it's years later and you're still continuing to fight for his name. And it's crazy because people are so evil where they're just gonna believe what they want to believe. Well, I don't care. I understand as his wife and she's supposed to, defend him, but this is what they said. He was an addict. And I'm like, y'all just gonna go with whatever the media says, whatever this person says, y'all just gonna, but this is not what it is. I'm showing you this is I have proof of what this is. You're still fighting this, and I'm sure that you're gonna keep fighting it until the day you're not here anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to keep Tommy's name, and we have to keep his name alive because he wasn't just a fighter. I mean, what he went through, no human being, I don't care if they have a dollar in their pocket or if they have $2 million in their pocket. That's something that no human being on earth should ever have to go through. So when the
Yeah.
drinking starts and cocaine comes in and marijuana comes in and every type of drug you could think of comes in, you can't just assume that somebody gave up on their life and that's why they started doing drugs. You weren't there when it happened. You don't know why this person is doing this because who knows? It probably would have never that them type of demons would have never came knocking on his door. But this is what you guys did to him. You did this to him. And you never gave him a reason why you did it. You never gave him a reason. You just threw him away like trash. And that was wrong. And they owe you an explanation of why. Tell me
Yeah.
why. Don't just explain to me why he died. Explain to me why did you do this? Why did you poison him like that? You are responsible for how he turned out. You are. Yeah, he's a grown man and he has to take some responsibility. But at the end of the day, you guys did this to him.
Yeah.
Before I leave this earth, he's gone. But before I leave here, you owe me an explanation of why, and I will not stop until I get that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's true. And actually, the way you said that, I had not even thought of that. During the lawsuit, I had to learn about testing for the virus. I had to learn about the sweet science and how that worked. It's very complex. Like you said at the very beginning, did I have any boxing background? I had no boxing background whatsoever. So I had to learn about the people in boxing, and then I continued to read some of Tommy's words because he did do prison time. And it was due to the fact that he was trying to fill a void. But he writes about it. And he says, prison time. I went from two-time heavyweight champion of the world, co-star of Rocky Five, a very celebrated athlete, to prison inmate number 610788. 14 months, 8 days, 6 hours, and 46 minutes. This is Tommy's writing, right? He then goes on to say, it's sitting in solitary confinement for 120 days that I really started thinking about all the time I lost being in there. I didn't belong here. Solitary confinement, court ordered AZT drugs, segregated into the psych ward floor, hands behind my back at all times, lights left on 24 hours a day in my cell, paraded around the prison like an animal. And then this part you're going to be interested in. FBI came to visit me, said I could get out that day if I gave them information on Don King. I didn't have any information. I planned on boxing again and knew I would meet up with King again someday. I accept responsibility for putting myself in this position. Yellow is not my favorite color. And that's Tommy's writing. You
Oh my
know, so he
God.
yeah. So he doesn't
So
blame
when they came,
anybody.
so when the FBI came, so when the FBI came to see him, they tried to make this deal with him. Yeah, well, you can get out. Just give us a little information about your boy Don King.
Yeah,
Wow. They wanted Don
yeah,
bad. They really wanted Don real bad.
yeah,
Wow. That's
yeah. That
and
was
and Tommy
very, very
wasn't
interesting.
Tommy was yeah, that was interesting. And I tell you what, Tommy was a big writer. He could write.
Yeah, he's actually written two and a half paperback books which describe everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and an additional book that never got published. And putting all that together, Tommy's words, how Tommy lived and breathed it, is going to be his own documentary. He's basically his own writer and producer of his own documentary that we're working on. So yeah, you can't explain it any other way other than by the person that lived and breathed it.
That's amazing. So he had some time to think while he was in there. So when he comes home, what's he like? What is he like when he comes home? Did you see change in him? Because at this time he can't do any drugs. He's in jail. So what is he like when he comes home?
So that prison time, and there are some other pages to exactly what you're asking that he answers. That prison time was before my time. That was in 2000, the year 2000.
Okay.
But
Okay. Right.
but before he did rehab, in my time, he did get jailed again, and that was before he did the rehab. And in fact, the mugshot that everybody gets to see out there, this
Yeah, I
one
remember that one.
here. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a jail mugshot. That's not an AIDS mugshot. That's him coming out of jail after being in there 30 days in solitary confinement, coming out for 1 hour a day, and then not even wanting to come out of his cell for 1 hour. It took a week to get a Bible in there for him. Or he has experiences that you will get to hear about again when you watch the documentary because he wrote me letters from jail. But what's it like for him to come out? The one thing that he told me is, I never want to go to jail again. I didn't deserve to be there. I don't want to go back. And he would cry, Clarence. He would cry. And when you think about it, it's the year 2024 now to be jailed for marijuana, right? And to be just walked around a prison like an animal of a marijuana. Things obviously change over the years and it probably wouldn't have happened today, but they made an example of him. And in fact, they said that to me. We're making him an example because the last time that he was imprisoned,
Yeah.
he was imprisoned for 30 days and it was a bogus felony fugitive warrant of arrest that they then dropped after a month and a half. And it was basically an $80 unpaid fine from South Dakota. But because he was Tommy Morrison, there were different rules. And he always used to say, I am Tommy Morrison. There are rules for everybody else, but then there's rules for me because I am Tommy Morrison. And the actual name of the title of Tommy's documentary is I Am Tommy Morrison.
Mm, interesting. That's yeah, that's interesting. So leading up to him getting sick. So they say. When was the first time you heard about it? Or you guys, did you guys hear about it together? Were you separate when you first heard about it?
Do you mean the 1996?
Yes.
Yeah, I was actually working in Vegas at the time in tourism. So I heard it there that day that he had HIV. And it was there that day that he heard he had HIV when he was told by Tony Holden. So that was way back then. Yeah.
Did you guys think like, wait a minute, like I said, this is crazy. How is this possible? Because like I said, when we all heard it, I was a kid, but even for some of
Yeah.
the adults that was grown then and they're older now, took it and ran with it. They took it and
Yeah.
ran with it. Like, oh my God, this is why you can't be out here messing with different women. And this is what
Yeah.
happens when you mess with. I mean, there's things I was hearing at the time is, yeah, when you're a fighter and you're in that life and you go into places like Vegas and you meet these different women, you got to put some protection on because this is what happens.
Yeah.
And a lot of us went for it. Like, oh man, we hate that it had to be him. We don't want to see anybody, but we hate that it had to be him. And then here it is. It's not really what people think it is. And now we have to go through this whole, like, we have to drag this thing. And then before the man could even get to find out what it is, and now it's like he's not here anymore.
Yeah.
And it upsets me personally because it's a lot of information that you're dropping off in front of our doors and for the viewers that
Yeah.
what people thought they knew, they didn't know anything. Because who's gonna argue with you about what you know and you were there? So now for the people who think they know, and I'm hoping that you being up here changed people's mindset, but it's hard to change people's mindset because they're still gonna go with what they want to go with, and the proof is in the pudding. But you're still gonna believe, well, I hear what she's saying, but this is what they said. But
Yes.
for the people who understand, they go, "Oh my God! All these years,
Yeah.
we thought this is what it was, and now this is. Oh my God! I can't believe this. This is what I said about Tommy, and this is what I was feeling about him. And Jesus, she came up here. She's telling her this. She's showing proof of this.
Yeah.
What did they do to him? Oh my God, what did they do to him? That's just the number. What did they do? Not what he did to himself, not what his wife did. What did they do to him? And it didn't make it no better that the so-called loved ones, nobody was there. I mean, Jesus Christ, if you
Oh,
weren't there in his life, it's no telling. And I hate to keep going back to that, but every time I think about it, I'm like, if Miss Morrison wasn't there, if you would have walked out on his life and just said, I can't deal with this. I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want my name stamped to your name. I'm out of here.
yeah.
Then this could have ended a different way. But so I want to commend you and God bless you for even still dealing with this because I know it's stressful. Um, it's probably a little aggravating, but then at the same time overwhelming. And I'm sure there's probably at nights where when you go to sleep at night, I can't say if you sleep well or not because him being here no more is not going to make you sleep better. But I'm sure there's some time at nights where you have your moments and you're like, oh my God, I not
You
only
know,
miss him and I love him, but why did they do this to him?
yeah. It's funny that you should say all that. We're in the year 2024. I've been fighting this now for Tommy since 2013, so a good long time now. And what's really exciting now, Clarence, is people like you, right? You're in the middle of Harlem, right? Is that where you are? Yep.
Yes,
Good. You're in Harlem. You've got Hannibal in Canada, in Ottawa, Canada. You've got Peter in Australia. You've got Dan in the UK. You've got
Hmm.
other people in Cincinnati. It's getting out there. And that is just so exciting. Yes, I do sleep at night. Absolutely, I do sleep at night because there's people like you now everywhere, but they're angry. They're angry that they're finding this out now, but it's getting out there. And I think that's all Tommy wanted is he wanted the whole truth out there. The good, the bad, and the ugly, he would always say, right? Yes, there's people that are going to be out there that are going to say really bad things. And let me read you one bad thing, right? Because I've replaced Tommy as the punching bag.
Yeah.
So they feel that they need to attack me. And I have been attacked, not so much now because of people like you defending me and Tommy, but I have been attacked, for my accent, my British accent, right? Can you believe it?
Mhm.
And, is she a gold digger? Well, what gold am I digging for? The gold that I've dug for to me is all the court records and exonerating Tommy. Oh, she married him for her citizenship. No, actually, I didn't. I got my green card through my father, who worked for the British Embassy, and I'm still a legal alien, and I can get my citizenship whenever I want to. But they still will try and character assassinate me so that all this evidence is like, oh, it doesn't make, it's not correct. Well, let me
Mhm.
give you an example. Let me give you an example. And I think I took over the fighting spirit from Tommy to never give up, which he never did. He never gave up on himself, but the media ridiculed him. The haters weren't so much at the time because he was still alive. Get face to face with Tommy Morrison and say what you're saying. That never happened, right? But it happens on paper. So, for example, and I'm glad that we're talking today. There was a Tim Callanan who on Facebook said Tommy Morrison was a big joke, right? That's what he said, one liner. So somebody else responds back with a question mark. And so this Tim Callanan responds, he was a roided out coke fiend who spent too much time with hookers and not enough time on the road. He was talented, but he never really put his talents to full use. Keep in mind, he couldn't make it in college football. Shows where the level of the sport was in those days. This is this guy, Tim, on Facebook. Okay. So somebody tags me who's in Tommy's corner and says, look at this guy. So I will respond publicly to your comment on my Facebook page. Feel free to Facebook request me. Well, he didn't. He never Facebook requested me, but I'll use this segment to publicly show him. So
Mhm.
I, I then pulled up so this guy who has never met Tommy, and there are people like this a little bit everywhere, right? He's never met Tommy.
Mhm.
He's slagging him for having been with hookers. Well, let me tell you, Clarence, I am Tommy's third wife. I am his wife and his widow. And I do know a lot of Tommy's ex girlfriends. I've spoken to his two ex wives, and let me tell you, none of them are hookers, right? I have never been contacted by a hooker that was with Tommy Morrison. So, no, he did not. There was no need for him to be with a hooker. Why would he be? So then I go on to the football stuff that this Tim says that, Tommy was no good at football and he was no good at college football. Well, in Tommy's book, Tommy's words, he goes, I had already made my mind up to go to college and play football with high hopes of one day being an NFL punter, having already signed a letter of intent to go to Emporia State University in Kansas. So Tommy writes about him wanting to go and do college football. So I'm thinking, okay, I got those words. Now, what I need is those letters that were sent to Tommy that gave him a scholarship because he was that good at to be in college football. And as I walk into the kitchen, lying on the table underneath some papers are all the letters that he kept, okay, of
Mm.
scholarships that were offered to him. All right. And these letters, Clarence, they date back to 1987, 1988, and 1986. Tommy kept those. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to present this to Tim and see what he now thinks because he seems to think that Tommy was no good. And then underneath all those were Tommy's little cutouts that he had of his days of playing football. He kept every newspaper cutting, even photos of some of his team. He was a good footballer, right? And he wanted to play
Wow.
football. So you've got this Tim guy who's never met Tommy, and you've got me, the wife and widow of Tommy, presenting you with facts that Tommy was good and was going to go to college. He even saved a Christmas card from 1987, the J High School Bulldogs. Okay. He loved
Wow.
his football. And here's his yearbook that he kept from the 80s, full of him in football. So I will always fight for Tommy because I have the proof that Tommy did not go with hookers, that he was good at football, that he didn't have HIV or AIDS because the scientists say so. So that just gives you an example of what I go through. I do sleep at night, Clarence, because I can provide the proof and I fight back. Some people say, "Oh, just let it go," and I go, "No, that's my husband. They're talking about. What if they were talking about your wife like that? What if they were talking about your son or your child? Would you just let it go?" So anyway, and then the next part of his complaint that he could have done a lot better if he had not gone with hookers, right? Well, let me give you Tommy's actual career reference here. And as of the age of 7 years old, and I know you train people, don't you, Clarence, in the gym?
Oh no, I don't train people. I'm just a content creator where I just interview the fighters and all. Yeah, so that's
Okay.
pretty much yeah.
All right.
I'm
If you
working
had
on that
into
thing. One day.
okay,
One day I'm working on it.
it,
One day.
good. If you had interviewed Tommy, he probably would have been very humble and not even told you this, but his career record was as of the age of 7 years, he started to train himself on his front porch. Okay. He had 290 amateur fights and
Mm.
263 of them were knockouts. This is a kid between the ages 7 and then at the age of 13, he then went into tough men contests. Now, you have to be 21 to be in tough men contests, but at the age of 13, he went into tough men contests because he wanted to help provide for his family. And he came from a poor background. And he had 51 fights, okay? And that was at the age of 13 to 18. And then between the months of March to October, at the age of 18, he won the Kansas City Golden Gloves. He won the Western Olympic Trials. He won the PAL Championships in Florida. And he lost a split decision to that rascal Ray Mercer, right? And that was in his youth. And then at the age of 19, he then starts pro. And his record, he will say, even though BoxRec hasn't labeled it as that, 51, 3, and 1. And he won two titles, the WBO in 93, the IBF in 95. That's Tommy Morrison. So let me tell you, if he was really going around with hookers, getting drunk, and all this stuff, how did he get to have such a great career?
Yeah, question. Somebody asked prime time, does Tommy have a brother?
He has several brothers. Yeah, stepbrothers and a brother.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, somebody just yeah, there was a fan who asked that wanted to know. Tommy did a lot. He was a busy man.
Busy boy. Yeah,
He was busy, and that's an impressive amateur career because I didn't even know that as far as his amateur career.
yeah.
I never knew much about Tommy, but what the public presented to us.
That's right. That's
That's the
right.
only
Yeah,
thing. See, and whatever the public present to you, that's what you're going to believe. Until some facts come across your table, this is what you're going across. If I listen, the thing is, I could have sat up here and talked about what we're talking about now,
yeah,
and you not being a guest, and I just would have had people up here, and people would have been like, "Yeah, it's so sad that he died from AIDS and all this." But when you have somebody that's actually there to present the truth,
yeah,
it makes it so much better because now just me hearing this, I feel better. So now I don't have to sit around a hater that dare comes out his mouth to say, "Well, I don't care what this person said. They said he died from AIDS. I don't care what you talking about. I got the truth.
yeah.
The proof
That's
is in
right.
the pudding."
And
So
yeah, and the
I don't
truth
have to
comes.
participate in the hate. I don't have to
Yeah, and the truth comes directly from physicians that were actually there
participate in
testing
the
Tommy.
conversation.
Are you there? I think we had a. I
So in the
think
midst of
Tommy's
all of
intervening.
he definitely is. May God rest his soul. I wish I would have got the. You know what? And I'm not gonna say I wish I was able to talk to him because you're here. You're here, and you are here to speak for him. And
Yeah,
that's the beautiful thing. And I'm glad to hear that. Now, him getting tested or whatever it was that took him out of here. When did you find out that, oh my God, he didn't have find out what he was going through and why he's not here any longer?
yeah. You kept cutting out there, so I don't think I got your
Okay,
full
I'm sorry.
question.
Oh, so when did you find out that, oh my God, okay, he doesn't have what they were saying he has, but this is what's really wrong with Tommy. When did you find out what was really going on with him? Was he still here when you found out, or was it too late?
It was a year before he died when Boston, Massachusetts General Hospital did the first proper examination and sent through the report to Kansas and then Omaha, Nebraska. And they're the ones that found that there was no HIV in him. And then it was in Omaha, Nebraska in 2012, after Tommy got tested for all the AIDS defining diseases, that's when we found out that he had no AIDS in him. And it was upon his death when they did the final post mortem pathology report that I got confirmation again that he never had the virus in him when he died. They did testing on Tommy to rule out false positives, which means that there are certain tests out there that you can do that will trigger a
Hmm.
false positive, right? Because you've
Hmm.
got other conditions in you that would trigger a false positive. The test that was originally given to him in 1996 was a laboratory developed test. It's called an LDT. And an LDT has not had clinical trials to it. Basically, the FDA had never approved that test, and it was never approved to detect HIV infection or the virus. And it was a test that would also trigger a false positive result if you had antibodies to something else in your system. So, for example, if you had steroids, it may test positive. If you had an autoimmune disorder, such as Coombs positive or other autoimmune disorders like lupus, there's a chance that it would test false positive. And if you were not a physician that did further testing to find out, well, is this definitely HIV or is it something that's been triggered off by an autoimmune disorder, then you would stick by just reading a lab report saying, that's it, he's got the deadliest virus, he's going to die. So all the physicians that he had between 1996 and 2012 never did a differential diagnosis. So anybody that's in the medical field listening to this, a differential diagnosis obviously means that you do other testing to see if it could be something else other than what you're thinking it is. You rule out other disorders. That wasn't done until 2012. In 2012, he was tested, and what came up was that he was hemolytic anemic, which means that you will test false positive on certain tests if you are hemolytic anemic. And that's the reason, right? So you could test positive, negative, positive, negative. And Tommy never knew that. And he was never treated for being anemic at all, ever in his life until 2012. So what did he die of? Well, when he got sent to jail in Wichita, Kansas, it was under a felony fugitive warrant of arrest. This was in 2012. And he actually came out, the end of 2011, and 2012 is when he had surgery on his chest because he came out of jail with what the physician said was an insect bite to his chest. I don't know if you can see that. There's a bit of a glare, but that's after it was drained. Now, that's on the side of his chest.
Oh,
a lot of people say, oh, that's MRSA. Okay, and he was actually tested for MRSA. It was not MRSA. The physician's letter actually specifically says that he drained his chest because of an insect bite, more likely a spider bite like a brown recluse, or even a tick bite. I think we ruled out tick bite because he was tested for certain antibodies that it would be a tick bite. So it was more likely a brown recluse. So the physician said he's got to have surgery on his chest because it's infected. So finally, after getting him out of jail and allowed for him to be relocated back again to Tennessee, he had surgery done on December 1, 2011. And it was supposed to be a 1-hour surgery. We parked in a 2-hour parking spot, and we left the hospital 8 days later. And it was more like an up to 8-hour surgery on his chest. They pulled out major and minor pec muscle out of the side of his chest. He'd also had implants put in, which was really stupid, not during my time, but they had to take out an implant. And what they did was they stuffed him with gauze after surgery. Now, we didn't know that. We didn't know any of that because we were not in charge of any of the care, the wound care. So when we finally got home on December 8th, the home health lady came, and I'm going to reenact this so that you can see how awful this really was. The home health lady came, and all she was supposed to do was change this bandage, a 4x4 that was covering his chest, right, after the surgery. So she took the bandage off, and I said to her, there's something hanging out of his chest still. And it was a piece of thread. And she said, well, there's nothing on my orders that I'm supposed to change. And I said, there's something in there. And with what's called the flat tongue, I pointed again, and she noticed that there was something hanging out. And Tommy was sitting on a stool in the kitchen, and the home health nurse suddenly, pulled with her gloves on, and she kept pulling, and out of his chest came all the surgical gauze that had been left in Tommy's chest. And as you can see, it was tightly packed. just had put it in a little tissue box, and she kept on pulling and pulling and pulling, and she kept on pulling, and Tommy was on a stool. No antibiotics for this, no painkillers, not in a surgical area, just in the kitchen. Out comes Clarence, 12 foot of surgical gauze out of Tommy's chest, covered in blood clots, and it smelt really bad. And basically, this had been left in his chest to rot for 8 days, causing septic shock. And that night, Tommy walked back to the bedroom, and his head went straight through a wall. He fell on his neck, and from that moment, that was Tommy's downfall. Not AIDS, not HIV, but it was a botched surgery with a surgeon leaving 12 foot of surgical gauze in Tommy's chest to rot without the home health nurse knowing that there was anything in there to pull out or change. All she thought was just this bandage. So people have said when they've listened to my interviews, oh my goodness, why didn't you sue that surgeon? Well, I filed with the Medical Advisory Board in Tennessee, and I filed papers, and they lost them. I had to refile those papers, and they said I was out of time. Statute of limitations, nothing I can do, and sorry. And the surgeon said, oh, sorry. And the next day, we did go back to the hospital, even though the home health lady that day that she came to change the bandage didn't whisk us off into the hospital, because Tommy was Tommy. He's been used to being bashed on the head by Ray Mercer and taking a whole bunch of knocks, that, this was pain, but he didn't want to make a big deal of it. But that, Clarence, was the start of the downfall. And tell me, Clarence, where have you read that in the mainstream media? Where have you seen that? Anywhere?
Haven't. No, not until now.
So you can imagine.
So you see me making these faces because I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah. And I took pictures for 21 months of his wound care. So basically, we were in the hospital for 21 months for wound care. It wasn't an AIDS dying journey. It was wound care. This is Tommy's chest with the gauze in there. That's, they sliced the whole side of his chest. This is me pointing to the nurse. There's something in there, and I'm actually taking photographs because people wouldn't have believed this. So she said, "Oh yeah, there's something in there." And then this was his chest after the gauze had been pulled out. You could fit your whole hand in his chest. But had his immune system been shot and he'd had AIDS or HIV, his wound wouldn't have healed. His wound healed. It was a nasty scar, but you'll see his wound healed. But it was too late. Septic shock, septicemia. The rotting of the gauze had gone into his blood system, and there was nothing to cure it. And for 21 months, he was in and out of septic shock. And he was such a brave guy. Nobody else would have been able to do it. But that's how he died.
Now, you said, at this point, there's nothing that anybody can do, but as that was being taken out of Tommy's chest, where's his mindset? Does he know that this is happening? Where's his mindset at this time?
Yeah, he knows it's happening. He sees it coming out, and he sees my face, and there was another witness there, one of his scientist friends. So there were witnesses. We couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe how much gauze had been left in there. It was, and in fact, as this was happening, I called the surgeon. I said, "What did you do? What have you done? You've just left all this gauze in my husband's chest, and it's rotting." And I tell you, the nurse got out of there really quick, and she took that gauze with her. She didn't leave it behind. And eventually, I did get a report from her. And that's when I filed with the medical advisory board, and they said it was too late after having lost the first set.
It seemed like every time you were looking for answers or you were trying to fix something, there was always some excuse with them. It's either you're too late or you just didn't get a response. And that too late to me is it's never too late. It seemed like everybody just kept trying to avoid what you were
Yeah,
trying to do. And I feel like this, right? I could be wrong on this, and I never like to accuse people of anything, but the writing was already on the wall that I feel like some people participated in this. It was
yeah.
too much because if you look at everything that he went through, it seemed like it was too much dirty tactics that was going on. Like everybody was playing their part to help destroy him.
So
I
Clarence,
mean, it's just
yes,
it's
there,
crazy.
there is more to the story. Obviously, somebody had once put a comment in on one of my other interviews saying, "Who was Tommy Morrison? Who was he? Who really was Tommy Morrison?" And the surgeon, and that should have been a red flag to us when we went to see the surgeon for the first time. The surgeon said, "I know you. You're in denial." And Tommy and I looked at each other. What's he talking about? "I know you. You're in denial. You've got HIV. You got kicked out of boxing in '96. Why would you even say that at a doctor's visit?" Okay. So that was one thing that was very strange. And then when I bailed him out of jail before the surgery, he got arrested 3 more times in the space of 3 days. So I bailed him out, and he was being driven to the airport for his flight. And they stopped, the bail bonds guy and Tommy stopped off at Walmart to get a charger for Tommy's cell phone. So while they were at Walmart, they got separated. The bail bonds guy went to the restroom, and Tommy then went off to try sunglasses. And then I get a call. I'm standing at Knoxville Airport in Tennessee waiting for him. And then I get a call that he missed his flight from the bail bonds guy. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said he never showed back up when I was at Walmart. And so I had to call the police station in Wichita, Kansas. I said, what happened to Tommy? He was bailed out. "Oh, we arrested him again." "Oh, why did you arrest him?" "Well, he was loitering, arrested for loitering at Walmart." I said, "Are you kidding? After 30 days, and then you arrest him again for loitering at Walmart? What are you talking about?" So I had to bail him out again, and then overnight him at a hotel at Wichita Airport, rebook his flight, and then I'm still waiting at Knoxville Airport, and he doesn't come off the flight. So I called Delta Airlines in Wichita, and I said, "Well, where is he?" "Oh, well, he missed the flight because they changed the gate." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, can you get him on another flight?" And they go, "Yeah, yeah, we will." And so they put him on another flight, and I'm waiting for that flight, which was the last flight of the day, and he doesn't arrive, Clarence. So I call Delta, and they go, "Well, we had a situation at Atlanta Airport, and the aircraft came back to the gate." I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, we had to take Tommy Morrison off the airplane, and he got arrested." I said, "Arrested? What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, he was arrested under drug charges." Under drug charges? I just bailed him out of a 30-day. I just bailed him out of loitering, and now I'm bailing him out again at Atlanta airport, and they said, no, 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 it's okay. We drug tested him and it was clean. I said, oh, okay, great. So they put him back on an aeroplane, Clarence, and it arrived that next morning. I pick him up. We drive home. What a horrendous 30 days he's had. And he drops me off at work that next morning, drives home, and then I get a call from Sevierville jail. And they said, we've got Tommy Morrison in jail. And I go, what? Oh, yeah, we arrested him under a DUI. I said, a DUI? How can that happen? It's like 8 o'clock in the morning and you arrested him for a DUI. So the test results, because obviously they gave him a test for DUI, came back and they were negative. Okay. So they released him, but I had to bail him out there as well, and they released him. So there's something is happening out there, that's for sure. And like I said, he kept saying, I am Tommy Morrison, and there are rules for me and there's rules for everybody else. So yeah, it certainly was an interesting event.
Um, it seemed like it started to be a pattern with the stuff he was getting into. You would leave him, or he'll be at the airport and he's supposed to be making his way to you or to wherever he was going, and then you always would get a phone call or a text message saying,
You froze then.
you just came home and what do you mean you have him? Wait a minute, you got him for what? I mean, did it get to
Yeah.
a point where you sat down and talked to him and go, okay, Tommy, listen, I know you've been through this. I know you've been through that. I know boxing made a joke out of you. I understand that, but what are we doing? What are we doing? And we're gonna continue with this behavior because then you're gonna lead me to make a crucial decision because every time I have to bail you out, that costs me. Every time I have to pick up that phone, I have to worry two things. Either you're dead or you're in jail. What are we doing? How long are we going to continue to keep up with this behavior? Was those conversations that you ever had with him, or you just said, you know what, I'm going to take nature course and whatever happens, happens?
Yeah, never had that conversation with him, Clarence. Never blamed him for any of that. Every time he got arrested, they revealed that the tests were negative and he wasn't under the influence of drink. And for some reason, he always found himself in a situation. And because he was Tommy Morrison, they didn't look at him as being the innocent one. He was always the one that they wanted to make an example of. And they told me that several times, unfortunately. But he was pretty strong. What I did do was after the surgery, I and the botched surgery is I quit my job, which was with the Hard Rock Cafe in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. A really great job, sales and marketing there. But I didn't leave his side. I just stayed with him, okay, for the next 21 months.
How crucial was it, or how upsetting was it to have to see those pictures of him, of his body like that? Because I know, even looking at it today, some part of you has to get emotional about seeing that. So how hard was it to see those pictures like that? I mean, you saw him before the pictures, but every time you look at that, how hard is that to look at that and realize that, Jesus Christ, this is, he had to go through all this and there was nothing he could do about it because by the time he was going through it, it was already too late.
Yeah.
That's that has to be a lot. And like I said, once again, and I'm going to keep saying it every time I talk to you, and I'm going to make sure I call too personally to check up on you, because every time me and you talk again, I don't want it to be for an interview, because a lot of these guys who do what I do, don't get me wrong, we have a job to do, but it doesn't have to always be for views. It clickbaits. People
Yeah,
are human and people have feelings. So I'm
yeah,
gonna make sure from this day on that I call you, check up on you, see how you're doing, and we have to keep Tommy's name alive, because you also have these young kids now that's coming up, that's amateur boxers who don't know
yeah,
who Tommy Morrison is. And
yeah,
they have to hear these Tommy Morrison stories. They need to hear these Mike Tyson stories, because everything is, the grass is not always green on the other side, and everybody's not
uh,
going to be for you. Everybody's going to act like they love you because of what you can do for them, because how much money you got, and you're going to find yourself in a position where people are going to turn on you, promoters, family, friends. But when you have a strong person in your corner that takes, they have to accept everything that comes with you, and they're not willing to walk away from you. And they say, listen, we're going to ride this till the wheels fall off. Unheard of.
yeah, yeah.
Unheard of.
He
That'll
was,
never happen again in life.
yeah, he was definitely a special person, and everything that you just said, actually, that's how he writes it in his book. You know, when the money's gone, you'll find a lot of your fake friends gone. And he actually wrote saying that I did a lot of things for people just because. He used that word, just because, not to make money off them. But let me tell you a
Yeah.
funny story. So we came to the Bronx, right?
Oh
And
no.
yeah, we were at an event where Tommy was invited to talk about everything that had happened to him.
Hmm.
So he started to wear bandanas, right? You know, along his head here. And so he took a break from the meeting, and we, like I said, we were right in the middle of the Bronx, and we went outside, and I guess there's a group called Crips, right? And and there's a group called Bloods, right? So we're
Oh
standing
no,
outside.
Tommy.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, this again, this is Tommy Morrison. So we're standing outside in like a 20-minute break, and he's wearing this along with his head.
Yes. Oh, Tommy.
So you got the Bloods coming up, and Tommy said, "It's going to be okay, Trish. Do not be afraid." And he would always say that, "Do not be afraid." It's written in the Bible 365 times. Do not be afraid. So I stood there, and he held my hand, right? So a group of the Bloods came up, and then they realized it was Tommy Morrison. Okay. So they were all chatting, and he said, "Hey, bro." And they said, "Hey, you know, how did you win that fight?" And he would explain it to them. Okay. And then up come the Crips, right? The other gang members. And we're just in the middle of Bronx here, and they're coming up and they're wanting to give this guy wearing this a hard time because they're the Crips, and I guess their color is blue, and you've got this guy in the middle of Bronx wearing red.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So then they realize it's Tommy Morrison, and you've got me holding on to Tommy, right, telling me not to be afraid. You've got a gang group of Crips,
Hmm.
and you've got a gang group of
Blood.
Bloods right
Yes.
there. And you know what? All they're doing is talking about boxing. That's it. And they had such a blast. And he was their brother. They all had such a
Yes.
blast, and they were all talking to each other. And so the next day, on his break, he wore his blue bandana. He said, "I'm going out there wearing my blue bandana." So they all approached him again, and it was just the best time ever. So, you know, you've got times where he goes through absolute hell, but then you've got moments like this where it's just like a miracle. And it was something that you should have had a film camera on. But that's the Bronx story that I wanted to mention that I've never mentioned to anybody, right, before. But we
Wow.
survived it. Yeah.
You know what? When you said you had a Bronx story, and it didn't hit me until yesterday, and I'm like, I said, now what kind of a Bronx story could she have?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking so deep, and I'm like, a Bronx story. I said, I never knew they came to the Bronx. So that
Yeah.
right there is funny because what you did was you brought two gangs who don't get along, and it wasn't even about who's who. It's about, oh my
Right.
God, you're Tommy Morrison.
Yeah.
Whether if they seen him fight or if they know him from the Rocky movie, you're Tommy Guns. Because that's what we would call him. We would call him in the Bronx Tommy Guns. We never really
Yeah.
called him Tommy Morrison. We called him Tommy Guns. Because he was like, Tommy had power. He could
Yeah.
hit you and he can hurt you. So when we saw him, that's all we saw him as. We like, that's Tommy Guns. That guy got guns in his hand. He could hit you. He can, one shot and you're out of here. But that's a cool story that he was able to do that, because anybody else, they would have jumped on him.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
I'm glad you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
And
were
and not
squashed him.
and not only that, but suddenly the HIV stigma was gone. You know, you had two gangs that were so close to him, well within the 6 feet, right?
Yes.
And it was Tommy all over again. He's the real Tommy.
Did you
But
realize?
he,
Did you realize? Did you realize right then and then how special and how important he was right then and there? Did you say, "Oh my God"? Like
yeah,
we're in the Bronx. We're in the place that we're not from. We're not from here. We don't live here. We've never had a fight here, but here it is. We're in the middle of the Bronx, and here it is. There's people that acknowledge who
yeah,
he is.
yeah.
It's a beautiful
And
thing.
it is a beautiful thing, you know, and now and again he would donate to the poor on the street. They'd be walking with shopping carts and he'd give them almost his last dollar. And they would turn around and they'd go, "Are you Tommy Morrison?" So he actually resonated more with people that were not millionaires, people that actually perhaps cared a lot for him more than the rich and famous did.
Now, with that part, let's go back to the Rocky, because that was kind of the situation that he was in when he approached Rocky. Um, he just wanted a shot, but he didn't have much. He didn't have a place to go. He moved from where he was to come to Philly. He was just looking to get a shot, and he was a fan, of Rocky. But he also was looking forward to working with him, and he just wanted the opportunity. He had nowhere to go, and Rock let him stay there. It's just crazy how that storyline was in that movie.
Yeah,
And people go, it's just a movie. I go, no, that's life. That's life. Rather if you
yeah,
want to believe it or not, now Sylvester Stallone might have not been a real fighter, but Tommy was.
mm,
That's life, and it's crazy because I tell people, when you go back to that movie, if you want to know what it's really like, go back to that movie and watch that. And still to this day, and to the day I leave here, that will always be one of my favorite Rockies out of all of them. Because you know what? When I seen that suit that Tommy had on when he was fighting Sylvester, I remember telling a friend of mine, I said, "Man, I wonder if that suit still exists." I'm like, I gotta get me one. I was like, I gotta, because he made it look so cool. It
yeah.
to have his name in the back. I'm like, I gotta get me one. I loved it. I just loved everything. I loved everything about him, and like I said, it's just important for us to continue to keep his name alive. And the funny thing about it, so I do this every Thursday. Now, last week I did Thomas Hearns,
Oh
and
yeah.
I was sitting in a room. And I was doing Thomas Hearns, and I was sitting here saying, "Okay, I want to do somebody next week. Who am I doing next week?" And out of the blue, the guy that was on here with me, a good friend of mine, my brother, was he mentioned Tommy and something. I forgot what it was. And he was like, I'm mad that Tommy lost that fight. And I'm sitting there like, that's what I'm talking about next Thursday. Thank you, Tommy Morrison. And he said, yeah, you know what? Nobody talks about Tommy. When they do, it's something negative.
Yeah.
It's something negative. Or they talk about the time that he lost this fight. That I don't care. Let's talk about Tommy next Thursday. So when I sent you that, it was also just to let you know that, hey, we're talking about it. But when you responded that you were coming on, I'm not gonna lie, that was tears of joy because I wasn't expecting that. Because yeah, I wasn't expecting that. When I sent you that, it was just to let you know that, hey, we haven't forgotten him, and we don't care what people are saying about him. We love him, and we're gonna keep his name alive. Because I was just watching a fight with him and Ray Mercer. It's always a hard fight to watch, and then I watched the one with him and George
Yeah.
Foreman. But then I tell people, right, even though we didn't get to see him fight the other contenders or the other guys that were there, I said, you got to admit, Tommy fought some bad boys that nobody wanted to fight.
Yeah.
Everybody wasn't quick to fight Ray Mercer, and everybody sure wasn't quick to fight no George Foreman. It didn't matter how old he was. Everybody wasn't quick to do it. So Tommy fought some dogs in his career.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
He
was
did. He didn't turn anybody away.
no. Did you ever sit with him and go through some of them tapes of his old fights? Did he ever sit with you and show you that?
Yeah, unfortunately, he did. And I still have them. They're the VHS tapes. So for any of the young kids, a VHS tape is kind of like this, and you put it into something else, and it shows the fight.
Yes.
So Tommy has a whole box of his VHS tapes that he kept, and I still
Hmm.
have them. And he did. I had to learn that he was a boxer, and he wanted to tell me, what he used to do. And so he did. He made me sit and watch all his VHS tapes. And there was one, and I have mentioned it before on an interview, where he puts in the Ray Mercer fight into the TV for me to watch, and then he falls
Hmm.
asleep. And as I'm watching the Ray Mercer, of course, I think it's the first 3 rounds that are great. Tommy's winning. He's, punching Ray
Yeah.
Mercer and knocking him around. And then whoop, suddenly it's crazy. You've got
Yeah.
Ray Mercer practically killing Tommy, and the ref is just standing back doing nothing. And I thought, well, I know nothing about boxing, but this is not normal. So I look at Tommy and I go, Tommy, what's going on? And he's fast asleep. And I wake him. I said, how can you be asleep and put the Ray Mercer fight on for me to watch and not tell me what's going on? And he looks at me, he has like one eye open, and he says, because I know how it ends, Trisha. So he just went back to
He
sleep
was.
again.
He wasn't. He
But
wasn't trying to relive. He wasn't trying to relive that all over again.
no, that's right. Because everywhere we went, people would always say, wow, that Ray Mercer, fight and that ref, and they would always blame it on the ref. So
Yeah.
I often wondered why nobody got Tommy out of that situation quicker than what happened. I have the MRIs of Tommy after that fight that show his eye socket, all crumbled and everything from that fight. And we were at the International Boxing Hall of Fame one year, and we sat next to somebody who was a friend of the ref, and the ref apparently had frozen. He was just like taken aback as to what Ray Mercer was doing, and he physically could not get himself to go there and pull Ray Mercer off. He had just frozen completely. So that's what took so long for this ref to pull Ray Mercer off Tommy, because he had just frozen. And Tommy listened to him and he said, that guy, he could have put me in a pine box. And Tommy kept on talking about it. And even Tommy spoke to Ray Mercer on it. They met up again in 2010. Best buddies. We all went out for dinner, and Ray Mercer came over for the opening of Tommy's gym, and they were laughing and giggling. And so, there's all that happens in the ring, but there's also stuff that happens outside of the ring that the media don't write up about. But they were very good friends to the last.
Which was beautiful because there wasn't anything personal, I'm sure, with Ray Mercer, because
No.
he still had a job to do in that ring. So it's really either the corner man or the referee's job to say, okay, you had enough. Let me jump into it. Now, I never looked at it like that until you just said something. So now when I'm replaying the fight in my head, he did actually take too many punches.
Yeah. I think it's either 16 or 18 unanswered punches to the head. Brutal. It's one of the most brutal knockouts in history. Yeah.
Because just one punch alone could turn you into a vegetable. That's just one punch, not 5, not 10. You get hit somewhere, just one punch could turn you into a vegetable. So the punches he took right there could have gave him severe brain damage where his career would have ended sooner.
Right. Would have ended in 91. Yeah, that day.
Yes. And we would have been talking about him. We wouldn't be speaking about no AIDS. The conversation would have been brain damage.
Right.
Too many shots to the head. The Ray Mercer fight finished his career.
Yeah.
And,
but it didn't. Right?
It
didn't. It was like a true Rocky story. What does he do? He gets up and fights again.
Can I tell you something? Miss Morrison? I'm going to be honest with you, and this is going to sound crazy. I'd rather his career had ended like that than for them to put these false lies out the way they did about him. Even though we found out the truth, I'd rather his career had ended with him taking 16 to 18 bad shots than you guys just putting out, hey, he had AIDS.
Yeah.
And then we found out that's not what it is. And then we found out he basically died slow.
Yeah.
It's you know what I mean? But he had a great career. But I just felt like it was so much fights left on the table for him. There's no telling how long we would have saw Tommy. We could have saw Tommy in 2001, 2002, still fighting. 03, as long as he would have stayed in shape, there's no telling how long we could have seen him, continue. I want to ask you something, because there's this game I like to play that I always play with the old school fighters. It's called What If? If Tommy is here today and he's in his prime for what you saw, and he's in his 20s, what do you think Tommy would have been like today in boxing? If I don't know if you watch the heavyweights today and what goes on, but even if you don't, it's okay. What do you think Tommy would have been like today? If he's 24, 25 years old, what do you think he's like today?
Well, if you look at the media will say, well, Tommy is just like Jake Paul.
Oh, no,
that's what the media came out with. But how I would look at it, and in fact how I made World Boxing News come out, is that Tommy Morrison's widow rips Jake Paul comparisons. I think that, first of all, if Tommy were in his prime, I wouldn't be here. I probably would never have met him. But in boxing, I think boxing's changed. And I'm not a boxer, but boxing's changed. You've got the YouTubing boxing out there, and then you've got the traditional boxing out there. And I'm kind of more with the traditional boxing. For example, like Nico Ali, Muhammad Ali's grandson.
Yes.
He supposedly He turned down a contract with Jake Paul, right, for millions of
Yes.
dollars.
Yes.
I think that's good. Because whether Tommy would have done that or not, I don't know, because obviously it's a business as well as a profession. But I think that the boxing isn't exciting anymore, not in the heavyweights, as far as I'm concerned.
As far as that comparison to Jake Paul, no disrespect,
Right.
there's no comparisons to it. They do the comparisons because of the race.
Yeah.
And
Ah,
I always and I'm going to tell you this while you're sitting here. I always told people that Tommy Morrison wasn't your average white guy. He could fight. They always said that white guys couldn't fight, but Tommy was something different. And I feel like if Tommy was here today, there's a few of these heavyweights that will really be in trouble. They probably would be working at McDonald's. They would be in trouble because Tommy was explosive and he was powerful. Even after him taking his losses, he still was a threat. And remind you, he didn't take losses to guys that were bums. They weren't
no.
bums. These guys were well known. And I think after the Ray Mercer fight, that kind of messed it up. It did. People felt like, oh, you know what? This guy is beatable. He is beatable. He's not what we thought he was. He's beatable. You know what? I want to fight him. I can beat him.
Yeah.
Tommy was still a threat. And I would have loved to see what it would have been like with him and Mike Tyson. Now, some people would assume Mike is going to kill him. We don't know. But we never got that chance because he was robbed
Well,
of that chance.
let me tell you what Tommy said. Is that Tommy said he would have beaten Mike, and there were a few reasons why he would have beaten him. But the main reason was that in 1996, Tyson was just coming out of prison and would have had ring rust on him. And Tommy knew that he would have beaten him for at least that reason. And Tommy also did mention that Peter McNeely fight against Tyson, that should have been his fight. Tommy should have been in that fight and not Peter McNeely.
You were reading my mind just now because I was going to bring that up. I felt like, and Peter is one of my good brothers too. I love
Yeah.
Peter. I haven't talked to him in a while, but that's my brother. I love him. I now it's making sense that probably was supposed to be Tommy's time. That
Yeah.
could have been, which I'm sure the pay-per-view for that would have been crazy. Tommy Morrison versus Iron Mike Tyson. Who's not paying for that?
Yeah.
Who's not going to pay for that? Because at this time, you got to remember, Mike Tyson is not undefeated. He already had lost to Buster Douglas.
Right.
So if Tommy would have went in there and did the unthinkable and beat him, the only thing that upsets me about Tommy beating him is that they wouldn't have gave Tommy the credit. They would have used the excuse of Mike being in prison.
Yeah.
So he
That's
didn't have the
right.
proper training, which that sucks because I don't care. I'm not responsible for that man going to jail. My job is to train my 6 to 8 weeks, my 5 days a week, or whatever, to get prepared for this man. But don't take that away from me. If I beat him, don't say I beat him because he had been in jail for the amount of time, the 3 years, whatever the time he went away. That's the only thing I hate about it, that they would have took that away from Tommy because he was in
Yeah.
jail. But if Mike beat him, they would have said Mike was supposed to beat him.
Yeah. Now the only thing is that the contract that was already signed by Don King had a rematch clause. There would have been another fight.
Oh,
Had Tommy beaten Mike, then there would have been a rematch. They would have fought again.
you think Tommy would have took that again? Because that would have been. I mean, in my eyes, that would have been kind of. It would have been
It was
suicidal.
already in there.
He was already
It
in
was
there.
it was already in there. It was 10 million to fight him, 10 million to do the rematch, right? And then another 14 million for something else. So yeah, it
Oh
was
my!
already in there. It was a signed contract already.
And we missed that. We
Yeah,
missed that because not no disrespect to Peter, and I talked to Peter about this. Um, I think that Tommy would have been it would have the fight would have been more explosive.
yeah,
It would have been because Tommy, like you had to bring it to him. You had to bring it to him because Tommy was going to bring it to you. And I think there probably would have been times in the fight that he might probably would have got frustrated with Tommy. And he would have been looking to try to knock him out or something. Because like I said, that's just the kind of fighter that Tommy was. But it sucks
yeah,
because I would have loved to see that. I really would have loved to see that. That would have been great.
yeah. Tommy always used to say, when people said to him, we would have liked to have seen it, he always turned around to them and he said, you would have got your money's worth, is how he answered it.
Um, I see these boxing games all the time, right? Every boxing game that it came out with, they put every fighters. There's a new
Yeah,
game already, I think, coming out in October. And certain games they haven't had fighters in, and it's been a couple years since they've been putting fighters in these games. And then I go, I love to see these old school fighters, Peter McNeely, Tim Witherspoon, whoever. But then I'm like, can we find Tommy in the game? Will we ever
yes, he
find
is.
Tommy in the game?
He is in it.
He is. Okay.
He is.
See,
It's
okay.
it's called Undisputed, Play Undisputed. And Tommy was in that game right from the beginning. They wanted him in that game. And so
Okay.
he's in there.
Okay.
He was,
Because you,
yeah,
you can't, there's no such thing as missing anybody. There shouldn't be a fighter that should be missed.
right.
You can't do these games and pick who you want. And I know they don't pick who they want because sometimes these fighters want a certain amount of money to be in these games because these fighters are
Yeah.
not going to just keep in these games for free. You have to really pay them. And I always wondered, I said, I played every game possible. And I'm like, I never felt that I saw Tommy in the game. And I'm like, is it me? Did I skip over him? Like, I used to ask myself these questions. So, Undisputed, thank God.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I would definitely play, I'll definitely be playing that. That's something. We
Good.
got 3 minutes. I'm not gonna hold you much longer. But give me a couple of funny stories on Tommy. Give me if you can give me a funny story, what would be one that you remember about him?
All right. One that I do remember is we had just bought a George Foreman grill. Okay. And so we had that in the kitchen. And Tommy loved to cook. He actually wanted to do cooking classes. So we had the George Foreman grill heating up, and then he had gone to the store and he had bought Tyson brand chicken. It was called Tyson brand chicken. So he looked at me and he had heated up George Foreman, right? He stuck
Hmm.
Tyson in there and he said, how about this, Trisha? Take a photo of Morrison turning Tyson over in the George Foreman grill. He just cracked up thinking it was hysterical. So that was one of his stories there. There are also stories where he would be driving my yellow Volkswagen Beetle and you have this heavyweight, 210 pounder in the driving seat because he was a cop magnet. So cops
Yeah.
would always look out for him. But this yellow Volkswagen Beetle had decals painted, so it had a big smile on the back and eyelashes on the front and back. And he'd be driving that. But one thing that always used to give him away was that he'd always leave his coffee on the top of the roof of the car. And he'd get in the car and drive off. And he would do that every single time.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
so just a lot of fun stories. Anybody that really knew him always had a fun time with him. Yeah.
Yeah, because when I look at him, I go, he looks like he was a jokester.
Yeah,
Like he would joke because like I said, these fighters are human. So when people look at them, they just think that hey, they're not jokers. I can't say anything to them. I can't go around them because they might swing on me. But they live a life as a fighter. So when you have to be in camp 6 to 8 to 10 weeks and you're not around your family and you can't have no contact, and basically back then there wasn't no social media, there was no video
no,
chatting. So when you have to go away from your girlfriend, your wife, your kids, and you're going to Bear Mountain and you're 3,000 miles away, that could be difficult. You can't eat the way you want to. There's no sex involved. So that's enough to make a man lose his mind
yeah,
because you're basically making a sacrifice to do all this. So when you
yeah.
finally able to sit back and relax, it's like, you know what? I could relax. I could be with my loved ones and I could joke around and we can have a good time. And that's the beautiful thing about it. But Miss Morrison, listen, I'm not gonna hold you. I've been holding you for 2 hours and some change now. I just want to
Is it
let you know.
really?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really has. Yes, it's 7:15. We started. It's 9:15. So now I'm like,
Oh,
okay,
wow.
yes, it had. But I appreciate you, and I don't want this to be the last time you come through here. We definitely have to make this happen again, and I don't know. I feel like we have to do something when Tommy days come up. We gotta. I don't know. I don't know what can we do, but I feel like we just have to do something, celebrate them in some way.
Yeah.
You
You
probably
know,
do it already, but I got to do it.
well, one of the things that made me contact you was you put Hall of Fame on your little tag there. And
Yes.
I wanted to let you know that a really special lady, her name was Kat Turi, and she was from the East Coast. She got all these signatures so that she could present it to Henry Hascup, the president of the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame in New
Mm-hmm.
Jersey. She writes a nice letter. This was done in 2023, and she collected everybody's signatures and just so that Tommy would get inducted. He's not inducted into any Boxing Hall of Fame. I recently heard that the International Boxing Hall of Fame will not induct him at any time because of the misdiagnosis of Nevada, which I think is really sad that it's a political
Yes.
situation there. But one thing that would be nice in the end is actually to get him into a Boxing Hall of Fame. So that's one thing that maybe you and I could work on.
We definitely will work on it. Because no matter how many times you say no, we won't stop. Eventually,
Yeah.
they'll get annoyed, they'll get tired, and they go, you know what? Let's just give her what she wants. They're
Yeah.
going to do it because so like I said, I'll call you and we'll work on that and we'll try to get some as much signatures as we can.
There we
And
go.
even if something doesn't happen in 2024, in 2025, it's going to happen. They're not going to be able to say no. We're going to be able to sit back and say that, we did it. So we're definitely doing it. But look, Miss Morrison, thank you so much for
Thank
this. And
you.
I'm going to make sure I keep in contact with you and we'll definitely do this again.
All right. God bless you. And thank you so
God
much
bless you
for
too.
remembering Tommy. Thank you.
Definitely, we definitely will. You have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye.